Hello, everybody. I think we're live. I think everything is showing live.
Yeah.
Welcome to Sex Talk with Natasha. We plan on having a full hour show tonight, but if there is a tornado, we will go to our basements. Pick it up another time. But hopefully everybody is safe wherever you're at. And welcome to the show. I'm excited for tonight's topic. I do have a funny little story to say. When I initially got the question, I don't know why I had the idea that we were talking about hangups with the penis. I went out today really fast and like bought 2 penises, which sounds kind of funny in of itself. Because I wanted to have models that I could show and have us be comfortable with that. But yeah, that was not what I was supposed to do. We're going to focus on hangups that women might have receiving oral sex. So actually we're going to be focusing on our own genitalia. And I already have a fabulous puppet, so I'm all prepared for the vulva talk. Anyway, Sex Talk with Natasha is an effort to have comprehensive adult education that's on an ongoing basis, because I'm a big believer that it's not just information that we need ongoing practice and ongoing ability to face some of these challenges that we face just coming from cultures that generally have not been very sex positive, whether that's our United States culture here where we're located, or our certain religious cultures or family cultures. There's all kinds of ways that most of us have had some type of sexual experience or education in our past that has not necessarily promoted sexual health. So I'm trying to really find a cost-effective way for you to have access to a certified sex therapist who's willing to kind of provide all these different resources. So this is one of them, a weekly Facebook Live where we focus on one topic that a guest comes on and asks about. And but there's lots of other things that if you become a subscriber, I'm constantly putting up resources on these things. And some of them that I want to focus on tonight is the daily actions. So every day I have either a little meditation or an affirmation or a resource or a homework assignment, just little small things that you can really focus on, again, on a daily basis to prioritize your sexual health. In so many different areas of our life, we prioritize our health on a regular basis, whether it's the food we eat or the exercise we do, or even mental health, like mindfulness for anxiety, things of that nature. But most of us haven't really been taught to do that with our sexual health. But then we expect amazing things to happen in the bedroom, and when they don't, we tend to either self-blame or partner blame, when in reality, I just don't think we've been given the skill sets to have the amazing sex lives we want to have. So anyway, that's one of the things that we do here. Another thing that I think is really positive is the community page, which is kind of like a Facebook closed secret group in a sense, where only subscribers can have access to some of those posts. And so it can be a really nice way to not only ask me questions directly, but also congregate with other people who are in similar situations and learn from each other and share different experiences. So we're really pleased with some of the things that we're coming up with. In August, we'll be starting our first live webinar, which will have actually like a 5-week series for a certain amount of people. We're thinking somewhere between 20 and 30 people. We're going to cap it so it can be kind of small group. So as soon as we start advertising for those, you'll want to kind of reserve a spot quickly, because they'll go quickly. And I hope to do those, start doing those on a regular basis as well. But turn the time over to Ashley, who is our producer, for a little bit more information, and then we'll get started for tonight.
Thank you, Natasha. And thanks everybody for joining. We're really excited to have you here. I know I'm excited about this topic just because I always get excited when Natasha's excited, and she's clearly excited about this topic. So just let's watch her, if anything. No, it's a really good topic, and I think it's one that we really need to talk about. So thanks for joining. For those just joining us, the format is the following. We go for about an hour. The first 20 minutes or so, Natasha's going to give us a little bit of a lecture and teach us some stuff about the topic. And then we're going to pull on our guest for about 20 minutes. And Natasha and her will go back and forth about the topic at hand. And then the last 20 minutes, we like to leave it open for you guys, for the guests. This is obviously for you. And so we really want to make sure we answer any questions that you guys have. So please send us your questions. We'll read them on air, and then Natasha will answer them. You can send us a Facebook message. Obviously, for our patrons, you can send us a Patreon direct message, and then you can email us also at sextalkwithnatasha@gmail.com. The first half is free for everybody on Facebook, and then the whole episode is on Patreon for those subscribers. So go ahead and head over there, SexTalk, or it's patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. And like Natasha said, great resources are over there. So please check it out. And for anybody that is interested in seeing Natasha professionally, please check her out at Symmetry Solutions. It's her online practice, symmetrysouls.com. So thanks for joining, and I'm going to turn it back over to Natasha.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. All right. So when we're talking about any type of sexual act or behavior, the very first thing that I like to tell people is that there's no one act that's going to make or break your sex life. Like, we're adaptable, creative creatures as human beings, and there's like 500 thousands of things that we can do sexually and figure out and enjoy. So I just don't want anybody to feel like this is, oral sex, receiving oral sex in today's scenario is necessarily something that I have to learn to enjoy, or that somehow I'm broken because I don't enjoy it, or that, there's something incorrect about me not enjoying it. We all have different sexual tastes and preferences. And sometimes it's as easy as, I don't like it, so therefore I'm not going to do it, and end of story. And that's fine. That's a perfectly okay position to take. So just starting off with that permission to not necessarily want to have to do something. Now, certain people might say, well, I don't particularly enjoy it, but I'm wondering if that's because I've never really allowed myself permission to enjoy it, or I grew up maybe with some ideas or hangups around that particular behavior. And so I'm interested, even though maybe I don't currently enjoy it, I'm interested in getting curious about it and seeing if with some strategies or ideas or help that maybe I can move into a space where I might enjoy this. And if you're coming at it from that perspective, I am fully with you. I'm on board, and I'm going to totally support that type of exploration. Where I'm not as excited is when a person's coming with this idea that my partner is really pressuring me to do this, or I feel like there's something wrong with me, and the only way that I'll be right is if I figure out how to do this. So it's kind of that difference between motivated personal curiosity versus feeling coerced or inappropriately shamed by our culture or by our partner or whatever that might be. So I hope I'm making myself clear in that regard. All right, so let's say that you're in that category where you're thinking, maybe there's something to this that I'm missing out on. Maybe I'd like to get a little curious about this. Maybe there's been aspects about this that I actually have enjoyed, but don't necessarily know always how to enjoy it fully. And I do think it's maybe some prior programming that's getting in the way. So that's what most of my comments will be directed at tonight. Number one step then is to really normalize our hangups. And what I mean by that, it's like, let's think of all the ways we've been indoctrinated to not really like our genitals. So when you think about genitals in general, especially our first maybe ways that we're taught about our genitals, it's usually during potty training, 2, 3, 4 years old. And what are you kind of normally hearing is yuck, or clean yourself, or it's kind of very hygiene oriented. Don't touch there. It's stinky. It's dirty. Wash your hands. Right? Not super like a sexy way to start your relationship with your genitals. And a lot of times there can be this kind of sense of uncleanliness around our genitals. And that goes for both the penis and the vulva, but we're focusing on the vulva and vagina today. So, and I think that even when you think about the vernacular and ways that there have been crass ways to talk about female genitalia, you often hear references to like smelling fishy, you know, some type of ugliness, or compared to animals, or something about it that's kind of dirty or gross or problematic. So given all of that background, and also given the background of our Americanized culture just recently, like in the last 50 years, being very anti-germ, disinfectants all over the place, to the point that we've kind of actually, we're needing to push back on that, because we're like, we've killed off so many germs that now we might have a problem with not knowing how to actually fight off germs. Is a problem that we have. And especially in the 80s and 90s, there was a huge movement about douching for women. I don't know if you remember some of those commercials about being, you know, fresh down there. And there was all these kind of weird ways and expectations that women had about their vulvas and their vaginas, like, I don't know, smelling minty fresh, like spearmint gum. I don't know what the idea was, because you're not supposed to smell minty fresh in your vagina. Like, your vagina is not mint. It's a vagina. It's supposed to smell like a vagina. And, you know, bodies do have odors, and we've become somewhat odor averse in our culture, both with deodorants and all kinds of ways that we try to mask the body odor that's normal and natural. And vaginas are kind of like self-cleaning ovens. You do not need to douche. In fact, a lot of times those kinds of products can mess with the kind of normal bacteria and normal, you know, acidic versus other types of things that are happening in those areas, and can cause yeast infections and can cause all kinds of other problems. So it's probably pretty normal that you have had some of these messages affect the way you feel about your own genitalia. It's also like the look of your vagina. So whether it's been shamed through like the big movement in pornography to have very tight, very like symmetrical lips and vulva type of looks that, you know, kind of like penises. There's a certain type of penis look that gets shown mostly in pornography. So is the case with vulvas. And since most of us don't look exactly like that, then there can be a lot of inner shame about, there must be something wrong with the way I look. And we've seen a rise in plastic surgery of vulvas for this reason alone, quite dramatically, just in the last few decades. So there's a big movement in normalizing that for women, that we come in all shapes and sizes, just like penises do. We come in different colorations. Sometimes the outer lips are larger than the inner lips. Sometimes the inner lips are larger than the outer lips. Yeah, so, you know, it is what it is. Sometimes the clitoris or the clitoral hood can look very different. In a way, the clitoris is kind of symbiotic with the penis, the shaft, or not the shaft, the head. And so in some women, it's actually quite a bit larger than maybe some people are used to seeing, and that can feel like that's abnormal. Your vagina and your vulva are more than likely very normal, just because you look different than maybe what's considered, you know, what you see even in anatomical books, where it's just kind of like one little slit and the two lips. I mean, it's just very sterilized and not very detail friendly. So I think that it's important to look at vaginas and vulvas. There's a great book called Petals. There's a great cartoon type document about all different kinds of vulvas that I actually use quite a bit on the patron resource list. So I'll make sure and link to that. There's a great documentary that I actually just linked to recently called The Great Vagina Wall, or something, with a kind of a body cast artist who took casts of many different women to show women, look at the variety, and also to show men, because I think sometimes men can have hangups around the vulva because they also have only seen a certain type. And when they're, you know, confronted with a vulva that looks different than that, it can be surprising or offsetting or confusing. So we want to really also educate our teens and things about these issues about body image. All right, so that's number one. Number two tip is, I think it's very important to make conscious, intentional decisions, to be intentional about what we want. And again, we do this in lots of other areas of our life. If I want a pet, I usually will, you know, educate myself about the certain type of dog or cat breed that would be helpful for my home or with kids or not kids, my situation. I might prepare by going to the pet store before we go pick up the pet and have certain equipment. You know, again, we're intentional about things that we want. We're not always, I think, equipped to know how to be intentional about our sexuality. So I think it's important to say to yourself, I'm going to intentionally befriend my vulva and my vagina and my clitoris and my mons and all those parts of myself that are such an integral part of myself, and that at some level I've probably had maybe a bit of an enemy or tense relationship with up to this point. So just being intentional about that, making a conscious decision to do that, I think it can be helpful to have a conversation with your vagina and your vulva. I think it can be helpful to just say hello, maybe take a mirror exercise, take a mirror to yourself, look at yourself, touch yourself, see what it's like to be confronted with your genitalia. And I have my little vulva puppet, so I'll show her to you. So she's one of my favorite little toys, and she says, hello, hello. This is our vulva vagina puppet, and it's very basic. Your anatomy is actually more complicated than this puppet will show, but just to give you a general idea, that these are supposed to represent the outer lips, and these are your inner lips, okay? And you can even see different coloration because your lips will vary in color. And then when there's an opening, of course, this is the opening to the vagina here. And you have this little flower here that's your urethra, where urine comes out. And then this little ridgy spot right here is supposed to represent the G spot, which is on the inner side, so kind of towards your abdomen of your vagina. Some women seem to enjoy that part of their entrance. Some women don't really notice much of that. I think a lot more has been made out of the G spot than is necessary, but it's there, and it usually feels maybe a little rougher than the rest of your vagina. If you've never inserted your own finger into your own vaginal opening, that might be an interesting experience for you to experience. Just what do I feel like as I do that? What do I notice about the different textures of myself at different places? Now, this is the clitoral hood, which is, in a sense, what is covering your clitoris and protecting it from, you know, the rubbing and things of your clothes. This is, in essence, it's what for the man would be the foreskin, which we actually remove in this culture for a lot of reasons that well, that's a whole nother topic. But anyway, when you become aroused, your clitoris, similar to the penis, will become erect and engorged with blood, and usually pulls forward from the clitoral hood. So then it's more sensitive, and it has more direct contact with fingers or tongues or your penis, you know, penis, if you're rubbing up a penis against there, or even if you're grinding up against your partner some way or against something else. So however you're using those things. So that's your basic, very basic anatomy of the vulva. So becoming comfortable with the different parts. Another resource that I'll give is just an anatomical list of all the different parts that you have. And again, with a mirror exercise, maybe looking at ways that you can find all those parts in yourself. I think another nice thing when I'm talking about having a conversation, I think that you can apologize to your genitals for all the ways that they've been shamed and called bad names and maybe ways that you've internalized those things. Like, I'm just so sorry that you've lived in such a, kind of vagina phobic or vulva phobic or kind of mean environment. I think our genitals have been bullied in some ways. So maybe apologize to them for that. Have a discussion about how you want to feel comfortable with yourself. It can just be a fun way to do that. Another thing that you can do is come up with your own names for your vagina and your vulva. Sometimes those seem like very clinical names, and they're fine. They're fine names, and I encourage people using them. But at the same time, it can be nice to come up with names that you feel comfortable with, that you enjoy, whether that's petals or lovely lips or whatever it is that you think is sex positive for you. There's also one exercise that I often give to people who are on Pinterest. So you can create a private board and kind of create a collage of positive imagery that reminds you of sex positivity when it comes to your vulva or your vagina. There are actually art pieces that are very sensual on Pinterest that you can include in that, or even symbolic things like flowers or fruit or other things that remind you of those parts of yourself that kind of are visually or artistically helpful for you to reframe some of these things about your genitalia. All right. My next tip is having a frank discussion with your partner. It's always, well, it's not surprising, but it's always amazing to me how much we do not talk to our partners about. So one is just, being frank about, do you have hangups with my genitalia? So it's not something usually a partner wants to tell you. At the same time, can we normalize that for them as well if they do? So again, they grew up with a lot of these messages of certain parts of a body being ugly or stinky or dirty. So are they having a hard time with the idea of giving oral sex for whatever reasons? And can we have a discussion about that? If they don't, if they're saying, goodness, I would love to be able to give you oral sex, and that's actually a really huge turn on to me, it's important to believe them. It's important to, even though you may not believe it completely yourself, it's important to believe your partner that they're in that space and not just have all these assumptions like they must be lying to me or they must not really like it or they're just saying they like it. Just really trust that your partner is wanting and is excited to do this with you. So if you have a partner who either has worked through their hangups enough to be safe with you or is really enthusiastic with you, then I think that you can start really slowly with some sensate focus exercises. You can start with your panties on. You can start with just having your partner's head in that general area where he can be kissing your abdomen, or she can be kissing your inner thighs, or he can be kissing your hips, or she can be kissing your knees, right? So whomever your partner is, they can just in general be in that general area and just get you used to the idea of having another person in that area. And then as you go, you can, then only kiss certain parts or only use the tongue or only use, you can just kind of create your own exercises to make it as comfortable as possible. And in the meantime, as you're allowing this sensate focus to happen, because the idea of sensate focus is not necessarily to have a bunch of sexual arousal and reach orgasm. It's really just to kind of notice what feels good, what doesn't feel good, or how do I feel about this type of touch? So it's not about pressure. It's not about reaching any goal. And again, I have a resource on sensate focus at Sex Talk with Natasha subscribers areas as well, so that you can do that. And then, be clear about what you like or don't like. So be willing to tell your partner. Again, a lot of times we don't tell our partners we don't like something because we don't want them to be offended. We don't want people to feel like they're not a good lover. At the same time, I try to tell everybody, you know what? Like, none of us are born with good technique. We learn good technique. That's true of musical instruments. That's true of mathematics. That's true of, whatever thing. Most of us aren't just good at things to begin with. We learn over time and with practice and with feedback, because again, one partner may have had a lot of success with a certain type of motion or rhythm or technique that now another partner doesn't enjoy. So being a good lover isn't about having a certain technique. It's about really tuning into each other and figuring out what's going to work for us at any given point. All right, my number 4 tip is using what I call anxiety reducers. Now, this may be something fairly like clinical, like actual anxiety medication to help with things like this. It can be something less clinical, but still a chemical, like a glass of wine, or I know some people use marijuana where it's legal, to relax. Whatever it is that might, as long as you're not using substances inappropriately, where you have to be drunk to enjoy something, but sometimes just a depressant or a relaxant can take just enough of the edge off to help you kind of settle into your own body and not be so in your head, and for those of us who ruminate, because I tend to be one of those, it can be really hard to turn all of this off and enjoy what's going on in the rest of you. So just that's an option, but there's also non-chemical ways to reduce anxiety. So whether that's really creating an ambiance that is helpful to you, making sure maybe your bedroom is organized and neat. Maybe there's a scent that you really enjoy, like having a scented candle or some other type of aroma product, having maybe certain sensual music in the background. So whatever it is that can help you kind of relax, maybe using a certain type of lotion. Even if you're worried so much about odor, there's lubricants that come with, tastes and things of that nature. There's certain oils that you can use as lubricants that can at least give you the idea that if you're afraid of a certain odor, it can mask some of that. Just make sure that you're not, putting anything in the vagina that has sugar or anything like that, because that can be problematic for your vagina. But if you're using things like topically on the top of your mons or even some of the labia, as long as you're careful that it's not being inserted to the vagina, you can use some of these things that have to do with taste. All right, my number 5 tip is mindfulness, which I feel like I talk about ad nauseum and on every show. But again, if you're practicing, and you're receiving oral sex, more than likely you're going to have some thoughts, right? So you may have some negative thoughts. You might start thinking about the grocery list. You might have some really positive thoughts. Who knows what you're thinking about? And really kind of reminding yourself like, oh, that's an interesting thought I just had, but right now I'd really like to focus on what's happening. So, inviting yourself to go back into the moment, not being judgmental about whatever thoughts you're having, just noticing and refocusing. And then the number 6 tip is practice. Practice, which is another thing I say often. There is some truth in the idea of becoming desensitized. Sometimes we're afraid of desensitization, but actually desensitization is a way that our wiring in our brain gets used to something. And so that's why, once you've had your first kiss or once you've had your first intercourse or whatever it is, it's less scary or less nerve-wracking or less whatever the next time, as it's supposed to be. And so if you're like, there's parts of this I really enjoy and I'd like to continue, even though I still have some of this stuff going on, with practice in general, you'll usually see a reduction of those types of symptoms, if you want to call them. Now, if you, again, remember going right back to the beginning, if you've tried it for a while, if you feel like you've given it a fair shot and it just really doesn't fall into your preferences, okay, I gave it a good shot. It's not really something I enjoy. Let's figure out all the other things that, we enjoy together and not get super hung up about that. All right, those are my tips for tonight. Guessing I went maybe a little longer than usual. So Ashley,
a little, but that's okay. I think it was really helpful. We'll go about 5 minutes with our guest on Facebook, and then after that, we'll go ahead and shut off Facebook. So for those on Facebook, get ready to head over to Patreon, patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. In the meantime, we're going to introduce our guest, Shannon. So Shannon, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome.
Hi, Shannon.
Hello.
All right, so tell me a little bit about yourself and what brings you on the show and what kinds of questions you've got.
Okay, well, first off, I loved everything you just said. It was like, yes, like I was like, amen the whole time.
Oh, good.
Okay, so about me, I guess. I was raised in an LDS family, and my mom was much older than I was. I think she was about 55 when she was raising me. So she was, past the age of like menstruating and all that stuff. So we didn't really ever talk about the female body much. It was really awkward for me. So I've been married for a little over 11 years now, and I feel like I have a good sex life. It's pretty vanilla, but I like it. It works. It feels good,
Yeah.
But the whole oral sex thing, I just can't. Like, and my husband, he's willing to do it. Like, he definitely has never forced it on me or anything.
That's good.
He's
yeah. I'm gonna force you to feel good because that's really gonna work.
You're gonna like it. Right. But even if he just starts to make his way down there, I tense up, I push him away, I get like a kind of like anxiety feeling, like no. Like, and so I love what you said about the anxiety reducers. I was thinking of that too, because I keep telling him, like, just get a few margaritas and try it. I don't want to be drunk, but if I could just get that little bit of a buzz feeling where you're in a happy place, like
right.
So I'm gonna be like, Natasha says this might work.
Right.
I don't know. Me and margaritas, though, it's not.
Yeah, no, it can. I mean, a lot of women talk about, sexual inhibitions being helped by a glass of wine or, one drink, and just be cautious, know your own body, know your body type, depending on how much you weigh and, your body mass, whatever. It depends how alcohol will probably affect you, right? And so, but you don't need a lot of it to just get kind of that little bit of a relaxant, right? That's happening for you. Because if you go too far, then all of a sudden it depresses you too much. Because in a way you don't, and this is kind of the problem that men have with alcohol, is that they also have inhibitions. And so they'll drink to not have those inhibitions, but now you've just depressed your system. Well, a depressed penis is non-erect, right?
Right.
And
that's sad.
That's the same with your clitoris. It becomes less maybe able to hold blood flow and the things that will help your arousal. So it is kind of you want to be very careful that you're not kind of crossing the line into inebriation, but that you're having enough in your system that just kind of helps. And it's something you can experiment with, right?
Right. Yeah. I think it's fairly easy to recognize when you're getting to that point, at least for me. It's like, okay, this is where things are starting to feel fluffy. Like,
right.
But I really liked how you brought that up. But so yeah, I don't know what else there is about me. We've had a few kids, and I feel like that's definitely impacted the way I view my body. I feel like it's mostly positive, but I definitely do worry that I don't look like an actress in a porno,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't have that type of body. So I think that really bothers me too. Like the idea of him going down there and seeing or feeling things that don't look like what he's seen on TV,
Right. So that constant pressure, I think that especially women feel of being sexual objects, that I'm supposed to look a certain way or be a certain size or have a certain body type in order to be considered sexy. And since most of us don't fit any of that current criteria that's going on, then it can be kind of hard. The good news, and I'll say this before we go off, because I'd also like to talk a little bit about what you and your husband can do just to kind of warm yourself up, right? Before he just tries to quote unquote go down on you. But before we go off, I would like to share that the research anyway shows that men, so this is just to help women out a little bit, men are very interested in their female partners. That they typically, so I'm not saying, of course, this is 100%, because there are men out there that will shame their wives or their girlfriends around their body type. But in general, men are super happy to have any access to your vulva, to your vagina. They're very happy with that. And the way that I can try to explain that, because they do these, they hook people up to all these different types of monitors, and they measure arousal and things. And they do this, showing pornography images, is that yes, men will get aroused. And then afterwards, when they're asked about that arousal and what they want to do with it, more than generally, they say, I'd like to go have sex with my wife or my partner. And men in particular have a lot of ideas around sexuality that we don't often give voice to that in our culture. So kind of the stereotypes are sex is all men want. They want the perfect body. They want this and that. And when you really study men, they want connection. They want their wives to desire them, to feel like they're sexy and desirable to their wives. They're usually very happy and positive about their wives' bodies, much more so than when you ask the wives about their own bodies, right? So even if we're on the little plump side or have stretch marks or whatever, men are, most men are still like, I love my wife's body. I love when she lets me touch her. I love, the sensations I have when I'm able to go down on her, to have sex with her, or when she goes down on me. So the research doesn't support a lot of our fears as women when it comes to our heterosexual partners. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
That's really sad, like that we, for so many years, put ourselves in this little box of what we think we should be when, yeah. I mean, my husband's sort of the same way. I feel like, he's like, I don't care, like, what you look like or whatever, but do I internalize it and believe it? No.
Right. And that's why I said, believe your partner. It can be really hard to believe your partner when he's telling you you're beautiful and you're sexy and you're gorgeous, and you're like, but I don't look like, Gwyneth Paltrow, right? Or I don't look like Julia Roberts or whomever it is that we're comparing ourselves to. At the same time, women, we do the reverse and we don't even think about it. So if I go to the show and I see George Clooney or Brad Pitt or whoever turns me on, I might enjoy that arousal, but I go home and have sex with my husband, and I'm not really comparing him to those people, right? So even though we tend to do the same thing that men do, for some reason, we as women tend to be a lot harder on ourselves. And that's, of course, I think because of all this cultural messaging. All right, so I'm going to go. What I'd like to talk about next is how you and your husband can start moving towards some exercises that you want to try before you just go for it. But I'll do that after we close. So Ashley, do you want to take it away as far as giving us a break?
I do. Facebook, thank you all for joining. We really appreciate you being with us. We're still going over on Patreon. So head over to patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. Obviously, Natasha has some more stuff to say. So head over there. As always, if you want to see Natasha professionally, please head over to her online practice, Symmetry Solutions. That's at symmetrysouls.com. So thanks for joining, Facebook.
Thank you.